poor technique is going to lead to injury over time if it's not addressed. If you overload someone who has poor mobility and expect them to be able to tolerate it, then you're just inviting injury. So quality over quantity every single time.
All right, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to the Verity Podcast, and we do have Dr. Jim. He's back. He's in action. We get to go over my injury experience, May through almost August. And as always, we have Coach Monroe on the podcast. Boys, what's going on?
Good to be here. Pumped to be back.
Yeah. Jim, what's new with you, man? Been a little bit.
Yeah, so we're moving along with the build-out upstairs. They installed some nice hardwood floors since the last time I've been in. So I'm getting more and more excited. Hopefully we'll be up in there in a couple months. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You got a timeline? we talked about this probably every episode.
That's a funny joke.
Yeah. I mean, let's go back to like freaking 2020 when we were like, just one more month. So I'm not going to give a timeline. I'm just optimistic that it'll hopefully be this year.
All right.
That would be sweet.
Fingers crossed.
Once it's done.
Yes.
Hoping for 2021. Monroe, what's up, man?
Another day, just ran around, did some grocery shopping. Thursday's kind of my down day, clean up from Monday through Wednesday kind of deal. So it's been fun.
Yeah, I think Thursday you can kind of feel the week start to wind down a little bit. At least I can. Where do you like to go grocery shopping? If that's even like a thing, I pretty much just go wherever. I really do like Costco because you can get a crap ton of crap at Costco.
Yeah, so Costco's great. I did go to Costco today.
Nice.
But the thing with Costco is you can't buy all your groceries there.
No, you can't.
So we go meat at Costco.
Yep. Good move.
You can't beat that $4.99 rotisserie chicken. That's literally the size of my head. So yeah, we do all of our meat at Costco, and then we shop at Aldi.
Oh, yeah, I do Aldi.
Just
yeah,
it's
clutch.
like we just get all this stuff that I don't really care about a brand for certain things. I don't know, just random stuff. But that's a lot of the kids' snacks we get from Aldi. So
yeah,
Aldi and Costco, it's pretty staples once a week. So
awesome, cool. Well, before we get into the episode, guys, let's just go real quick. What are we working on in the gym right now, if anything? I can go first while you guys think about this real quick. We've got a competition coming up in New York, Long Island. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Long Island. Yep.
Long Island.
Long Island. Okay, cool. I'm going there with my wife, Sydney, Bailey, Nick. We're going to go there, do Flex on the Beach there in about a month? Yeah, it's a month away. We tested a workout yesterday. Went pretty well. It's pretty fun. And so basically I'm just working on lifting heavy and I'm going to say bar muscle-ups, chest to bars, stuff like that. But overall, that progress has been going really well since the knee injury and rehabbing and doing all that stuff.
Yeah, I've seen you working really hard on it, which is good to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't need much help with the bar muscle-ups and the chest bar pulls.
Yeah, you look like you were trying to get up just fine yesterday when I saw you in there.
I felt like I struggled. I need to be lifting probably more than anything else just to kind of get strength back, get motor patterns back, because I really just didn't lift heavy for 3 months, something like that. Monroe, what are you working on, man?
So I, too, have a competition now.
Where are you going?
Kind of surprised.
You coming to the same one? Do we get to be buddies?
No, me, Pat, Chelsea, and Carly are signed up for the MAC. So doing
like the Mid-Atlantic.
So they're the MAC. It's the what's it called?
It's not Mid-Atlantic.
It's like no, it is. It's like the MAC Fest. I think they're calling it.
Okay.
They basically wanted to have what the MAC was before it became like CrossFit's sanctional event.
Right.
So it's a good chance for a team that wants to go to sanctional, or just has that as the goal, to kind of give a test run.
Yeah, that's a solid team too, man. You guys are going to be good. When is it?
November. I think the second weekend in November.
Where's it at?
Maryland.
Awesome, man. Dude,
Yeah,
I might have to put that on my friggin' calendar and actually come watch you guys perform. That'd be super fun.
We're trying to get a worm. So Rogue is out of stock of a worm. So if anybody has any connects at Rogue, they can get us a worm.
Connects. Or if you're really good at like sewing and putting stuff together, let us know as well.
Right.
We can just make one.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be wild. Jimmy, what are you working on now?
Well, actually, I was talking to the member. His name is Eric Skorlak. He was telling me about this Russian squat program that he's done, and he's added like 50 to 60 pounds after doing this cycle.
Eric's strong dude, man.
Yeah, he's a beast. So he was telling me all about it, and I was like, hey, I wouldn't mind improving my squat a bit. So I started that up this week. Yeah, so that's about, I think it's a 6-week program. So
Yeah, talk to me about this Russian squat program. Like, how many times a week are you doing this? What's different between that and what you were doing?
Well, this is definitely going to be a lot more squat focused, whereas like when you go through class, obviously there's a bunch of different moves they're prioritizing. This is going to be prioritizing squatting 3 times a week. And then they give you the breakdown based on, you plug in your like 1 rep max into a calculator, and then it spits out the whole program for you.
Based on percentages and stuff,
Yeah,
I'm assuming?
exactly.
Okay.
So
Cool.
then from there, like some of the later weeks look brutal. So it's gonna be good challenge.
Yeah, 3 times a week. That's a lot of squatting, but we'll come back to that and let us know how it went and everything like that. That sounds good.
Sure.
Let's jump into the episode here, guys. Jim, I'm probably going to have you lead the charge here on what direction you want to go. Today we get to talk about knee pain, issues, rehab, and we get to use me as a case study here for a little bit of background. I was doing a power clean back really beginning part of May. Caught it super toesy, and something. It wasn't like a popped, but immediately I felt pain in my right knee, and from there, tried taking time off. Didn't seem to work. I tried stretching a lot. I was stretching my hamstrings a lot, which is super funny to think about. Cause after I went and worked with Jim, that was pretty much the opposite of what I needed to be doing. So I was doing that, icing, doing a bunch, and nothing really seemed to work. I couldn't get it to 100%, and then over the process, I re-injured it doing another power clean, which was just stupid. Doing something really heavy, and then I finally, had some humility and reached out to Jim finally, and I'm like, hey man, can you help me fix myself here? And we kind of went from there. So Jim, what direction do you want to go here, man, and where do you want to start?
Yeah, so this is a really good case study for a CrossFit athlete getting injured, because you were predisposed to this injury because of how quad dominant you were. All right, so and that's something that we see super commonly with CrossFit athletes and with weightlifting athletes in general. Whenever we're doing squatting, single leg, lunging, things like that, it's really going to develop the quads more relative to the hamstrings. And something that I hear, because on my Facebook and Instagram, it's all like physical therapies and chiropractor people posting videos, and something that you'll hear a lot is overexcited or inhibited muscles. All right, so in your case, we had an overexcited quad muscle. All right, the quad muscle extends the knee, the hamstring muscle flexes the knee. And when you're quad dominant, that means that your quad is at a higher resting potential than your hamstring. So when you go to fire that leg, you're using it more. And it's kind of like this feed forward system where the quad becomes super strong and short, and the hamstring becomes long and weak. So with you, obviously a lot of people are like, oh, I have really tight hamstrings, but it's usually like you have weak hamstrings that you need to strengthen, and then you won't have that sensation. We also need to lengthen out those quads to reestablish balance between the front of the knee and the back of the knee. So in your case, you got injured, and what the body does when you injure it is it tightens up the surrounding muscles so that you don't re-injure it more. It's kind of its way of saying like, hey, you've had enough to drink, we're cutting you off. Like we're gonna shut you down from using that muscle group so that no more damage occurs and that it can heal normally, all right? But since we're athletes and we like working out and this is what we do for fun, you kept pushing the envelope, and then more problems can occur from there. And obviously that's not ideal. So I was so happy when you came in to see me, because I was like, hey, this is right in my wheelhouse. This is the place you need to be. So I think we probably did about 10 to 12 treatments over the course of a month to a month and a half.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, a mixture of dry needling, adjusting, stretching, flossing, threw the textbook at him, and I also put a lot on his plate in terms of the rehab exercises, and you did really, really well with that. But was that your first time seeing a chiropractor?
Yes.
So how was your experience, and what were your expectations versus what ended up happening?
Man, it's a good question. Let's start from the beginning. Let's go.
Incense.
What's that?
Thought he was gonna burn incense.
No. So the expectation, at least going into the first appointment, was pretty much what I expected. And that first appointment, I still have like nightmares on that, because my quad was so tight that, Jim took his thumbs and applied. It wasn't a lot of pressure. It was just a little bit of pressure, and I was like. Any sort of thing that he did. And
Monroe remembers
the
that.
worst is when he touches you and he's like, barely putting anything on, barely any pressure. I'm like, you're lying.
Yeah. And it was incredible. I couldn't believe how tight the quad was when we did that. So we did some we did a lot of different stuff, just trying to loosen that muscle up. And then we did the other thing that was really eye opening was the hamstring test on strength. And Jim basically took 2 fingers. I was in a supinated position.
You were prone on the table, and I just told you to bend your knee. And I just took my hand. I was like, all right, don't let me open this leg up. So I was just loading up that hamstring, and he just had absolutely no strength whatsoever. Yeah. And I was like, now you're super strong. I've seen you lift before, and you're not getting anything from this hamstring.
Yeah, it's all quad based, and so from there. It hurts. It hurts more than I thought, right? The treatment itself, it's kind of uncomfortable, but it all gets you to go, so you're going to feel really good. So that was an expectation that I didn't have. That was a little bit different. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Got to break a couple eggs to make the omelet.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And then the rehab was really key. And the rehab it was much longer. And it's hard. And the part that I would look forward to the least was just foam rolling my quads, because again, it was so tight. And it was pretty tight on the left side too. That it was painful to kind of sit there and just kind of go through that. And I remember in the past I used to not roll my quads a lot because I thought I was rolling on a bone because it was so dense and it was so hard. And I'm just like, gosh, I must be super bony around my legs. And that's not the case. My quad was just so unbelievably tight. And it's not that way anymore, which has been really eye-opening. So, starting process. Ultimately okay, hurt a lot more, and then the rehab just longer and kind of harder than I thought.
The thing too that is important is that when you first get injured, it's so much easier to nip it in the bud at an early stage than if you continue to train on something and then now you're learning all these bad movement compensations to try to avoid the pain. So then we basically have to reprogram you back to the normal baseline. So if you were to have, hey, you did the first heavy power clean and you felt something wrong and then you came in, the quads wouldn't have gotten that exaggeratingly tight. And that's why I talk with a lot of my patients about, maintenance treatment. So even with you, you've been pretty much discharged from this injury, but I was like, hey, once a month, get back in, check in. So this way I could do the adjustments, we could do stretching and see hey, this is what you need to focus on so that you don't predispose yourself to another injury. And that's something, the maintenance aspect of especially people who love training this way and love using their bodies, you gotta take care of it. It's super important, especially as we get older. So
I had one of those right before this podcast.
Oh yeah, Monroe just came through and got treated. And it's
little maintenance check. Mm-hmm. He doesn't stick needles in me or put cups on me. He just tells me, you really should be warming up more. You really should be sitting on that foam roller a little more.
Well, I'll never forget you were telling me a story about you and Luke, and it was oh, I could do that cold with sandals on.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just when you said that sentence, I was just oh my God.
It was exploding.
I don't even know where to start with something like that.
Crazy.
So you've come a long way.
Thanks.
Yeah, man.
Monroe, you dealt with something in the past. What did you work with Jim on? Because we both had similar stuff as far as hamstring straight goes on. What did you work on in the past with Jim?
Yeah, so I too had really bad knees, and I think a lot of, I was lifting heavy and not paying attention to what I was doing. I was doing clean and jerks. This was a long time ago, back at the old gym, and Luke, matter of fact, just walked through the door, and I was like, oh, you want to watch me do a touch and go? And so I wasn't warmed up touch and go, brought the bar to the floor, and just felt something pull way longer in the back of my knee. And then from there, I wasn't going to see Jim this time, and I was just trying to get it back to normal. And I basically think that I relearned how to do everything the wrong way without bending my knee. And so I just kind of learned how to do CrossFit and lift really, really heavy by just sticking my butt back really far. And instead of fixing the range of motion at my knee and improving that, I just was, because I put my butt back further, my spine's mobility got better, my shoulder mobility got better, and it just compensated for the lack of mobility and stability that I had at my knees. And I had the same thing as you, locked up quads and everything.
Locked up quads and then weak hamstrings too. That was the really glaring thing I remember. But
and I remember when you told me that, and I was like, "You're like, dude, your hamstrings are really weak." And I'm like,
"Can't be."
I deadlift 500 pounds.
Right.
Like, get out of here. There's no way that's a weak hamstring. It's just not possible. And it's like weak in, like, I guess, and through this whole recovery process and working with Jim and everything, it's like I've really started to understand that I had no feeling of the back of my leg, and I didn't know what it was like to pull with my hamstring. And that's one thing you were saying. You're like, CrossFit athletes, like knee extension. Like, we don't do a whole lot of knee flexion, like where we're like pulling like in a hamstring curl with anything. And like, I can't think of a lot of sports where there's more in this direction than there is in knee extension,
Yeah.
Like, most people are quad dominant, right?
The majority of people are quad dominant, and quad dominance can also come from sitting behind a desk all day too, because you're in a position where the quads get super tight and then the hip flexors get super tight, and just like that overactive or underactive muscle group, it's again, when the whole front side is super tight, it's going to make it really hard to engage the back side. And that's why, whenever, if you see me warming up in the gym, it's always like glute bridges and things like that to get that posterior chain firing, because like that's where the power is. Not that I'm powerful, but I know how to prevent myself from getting injured. So those are things that I always sprinkle into the warm-ups or cool downs or when I have downtime.
For sure. Yeah. And like, as I started to strengthen my hamstrings and really look at both sides of the leg and look at the way that the whole leg works, I think it like kind of made me almost overly cautious about what I do. And now I'm like so concerned with, this is kind of what I was saying like earlier, it's like I'm almost so concerned with making sure it feels good and only lifting right, because it's like I don't want to hurt myself. So that's what I was saying to you, like I just want to get back to where I can lift bomb a squat like cold and feel good,
Yeah, and I think that, it's funny to me because I'll never forget when I told you to like sit back on your heels once when you were like sitting on your knees, and like you're just floating in the air. It looked like a magician like doing a magic trick, and I'm like, no, seriously, sit all the way back. He's like, I literally can't go any further back. And I was like, oh my God. So your problems today are so like minuscule relative to like what you used to look like. That's why I was messing with you in there. I'm like, dude, you're fine. I'm like,
it still feels like a problem though.
I know.
And I think that me going through that and like realizing how big of a problem it was, and it's not just the mobility, and like the mobility is useless without stability. I say that to people in there all the time. Like, it becomes so much more apparent when I'm like, wow, I see people that are really strong, but you're just not stable at all.
Yeah.
And you watch the barbell move and you're like, well, how are you supposed to catch that? Like, you're so damn strong.
Yeah. So, program, and that's why I really like what you opened up my eyes to, is that the knees over toes guy, and a lot of those rehab exercises are really well put together, and it's something that I implement with a lot of my patients now, because those are really good ways of isolating and strengthening those muscles that we definitely, it's just a product of the sport that we compete in that we neglect. So doing those things in conjunction with the training is a really smart way to help prevent the injury from happening in the first place.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. The
Nordics,
the Nordic
Jefferson
curls, and I think it was a couple podcasts ago where you were like, hey, what are you guys working on? Or like, what's your goal? And I was like, Nordic hamstring curl. Just like totally joking, like, oh, I'll never do that. Like, oh, it'll take me a year to be able to do that. And I just started adding them in 3 times a week, and like, now I can do Nordics on flat. And it's like, the other day,
you can do Nordics now?
Yeah. Me and
Pat, I'm still doing eccentrics on that. Those are difficult, dude.
So me and Pat were doing the other day. I'm like, I can go down and up for like 6 or 7 reps now.
That's incredible.
I can like hold at 45 and pull back up.
I think that's more impressive than you squatting like 400 pounds. I think that blows my mind.
So it's like cool, because I feel like, okay, now I can do that. So how come I'm still having these issues? And it's like, I just think it's going to take more time and more stability,
Exactly. I think it's going to be more time, more stability work, because like you've taken these leaps and bounds, just like you're not there yet. It's like if you take someone who's like overweight and then they lose like all this weight and they don't have like a 6-pack yet, it's like you're getting there. It's like you just got to keep going forward, and like that's what I was saying, like, hey, keep up with those rehab exercises. Like, you've improved so much, it's going to keep improving. It's just like we're not there yet.
Right.
So you're still on the journey. But you're doing a heck of a lot better. So, and I give you a lot of credit because I remember all the different times I walked into the gym and watched you doing those rehab exercises, and I'm like, not a ton of fun, but definitely
No, not at all.
Yeah, but definitely necessary, and you feel the benefits of it, and you're going to be a lot better athlete because of it too.
Yeah.
So.
And it was good to have Pat with me because I was just like, hey, Pat.
Yo, Pat, but
Let's
you can't,
do some
but you
Nordics.
can't-
Yeah.
but you can't do this, Pat.
Yeah,
And then-
seriously. And
yeah.
then,
How did you compare to Pat when you were doing Nordic hamstring curls?
So Pat can do them now too. Like,
That's awesome.
He's like gotten much stronger from it. Like you can, and it's one of those things where it progressed so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, dude, we want to do them a couple times a week, but it's like they just progress. And I don't know if that's because it's something I've never really done. And it's like I feel like even though when you said like, oh, your hamstrings are weak, like they're not weak, right? Like
You just
you
weren't good
can't
at
build a
recruiting
500-pound deadlift without building some strength in your hamstring.
It's-
But like, you know what I mean? Like it was like almost like that strength was turned off.
Yeah, I think that you're thinking about it the wrong. I mean, maybe that's not the right way of phrasing it, but like when you go to like, let's say you're even like doing a bicep curl, right? You're not just using your bicep.
Right.
Your shoulder has to stabilize, your core has to stabilize, your back muscles turn on. Like we're recruiting all of these different motor units, and when you're doing a lift like the deadlift, you are literally recruiting every muscle in your body to lift that. Okay, so you are able to lift tremendous amounts of weights using muscles that weren't necessarily the hamstrings. Now when you go to do it, now that you have a much better, sensory control of that, you're going to lift it a lot healthier and a lot more efficiently.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, but when I isolated your hamstring, it was like, hey, like hold up here, and then you fail. It's like, well, then this just objectively isn't as strong, but you're able to compensate for it because you have a lot of power in all these other different muscle groups.
Yeah, and I think that's also changed the way, I think I've seen this with you too, where it's like, kind of changed the way that you think about training in the gym. Like, I really don't care what weights are lifted. And like for myself or other people, like I care the way it looks. And it's like, I care whether it feels good, I care whether it's a full range of motion, I care whether it's snappy and whether it's right. And like now, like, if it looks like shit, like what's the point, Or if it's not a full range of motion, like, we did overhead squats earlier this week. I'm not going like as heavy as I possibly can because I want it to be super deep and I want to be able to hold down there and like really own those positions and own those movements instead of just being like, oh, I'm just going to bounce up and down out of the hole and just like try and put a number on the board. And I definitely think that takes some maturity in training. How do you, what do you think about that? How do you deal with like being humble, I guess?
I've had much more of a focus on moving really well, especially as of late, because I'm so quad dominant that it happens in every lift that I do, right? And you'll watch me hop forward, and if you're going forward, it's because your weight's forward, so you're going to go forward. Much more cognizant of that now, So, I was snatching last night. I was snatching with Sydney, and I only worked up to about 175 pounds, and I got to 185. Wasn't moving that well. I was jumping forward like crazy, and then I just worked back down the barbell, and I wasn't really worried about getting as much weight on the bar as possible. Same thing with cleans and everything. So I think I reflect that when you say something like that, Monroe. Yeah.
So how do you think, like, when you tell someone, because, like, and I see this a lot with Morgan, where it's like, yeah, Dr. Jim can fix you. He can make you feel better, He can give you some stuff to make it work, but, like, you have to kind of change the way that you think about, you can't just go in and slam yourself into the same position and expect that you're not going to end up back in your office. You told me that. You were like, you're going to have to do this on your own. You're going to end up right back here in my office with messed up quads.
Yeah, it's, and I think that you hit the nail on the head with your story about the overhead squatting. I mean, the technique is literally the most important part because if you own the technique, the weight doesn't matter. The weight's going to get a lot easier. But like if you take someone with like restricted mobility, like, I mean, I'm a good example of it too. My ankles don't move the way they're supposed to, and it's not a smooth, crisp, beautiful movement when I squat. And poor technique is going to lead to injury over time if it's not addressed. If you overload someone who has poor mobility and expect them to be able to tolerate it, then you're just inviting injury. So quality over quantity every single time, because everyone here, everyone loves exercising, but like you're no good to yourself if you, blow your back out or blow your knee out. It's, and that's what's a challenging thing about a sport like CrossFit is that people love, it's competitive, which is what makes it a hell of a lot of fun. And you want to perform the best you can, but sometimes your eyes get a little bigger than your stomach, and then you bite off more than you could chew. So yeah, being humble. And it's funny because like if I were to tell you that when you were like 20 years old, you would have been like, yeah, right. Like, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Get out of here,
But
Jim.
as we're like approaching, late 20s, 30s, and then, even as we continue to get older, I mean, that's really what's the most important part is like being healthy enough to lift. That should really, for, the 99% of people who aren't going to the games, that should really be the goal. Because,
for sure.
I mean, yeah, so for sure. I think the technique is super, super important. And I think that's something that separates this gym from a lot of the other gyms is how attentive the coaches are.
I mean, I think a lot of that, like starting with private training first, I think is really important, and that was something that was kind of sold to me as a gym owner where they're like, hey, you probably should do PT first. And I was, when I started CrossFit, it was just, throw
Jump
you
into class, yeah.
And I was like, for the first few years that we did it, I was like, well, I learned in class. And I didn't want to say that like, oh, well, my group coaches aren't good enough to be able to have somebody brand new who's never done this before and bring them in class, but that's just the wrong, like you're setting that person up for failure, and I think especially when you are recovering from injury, doing a little bit more private training might be, really useful because a lot of it is like, at least what I've found is retraining your body to know what safe and stable is. And if you're doing the movement incorrectly in the first place, you're teaching your body the wrong idea of what safe and stable is. And like for me, as I've gotten more range of motion, things feel different now. Like I started doing those piriformis good mornings, like with my foot up on the bench, and like ever since I opened that up,
whoa, that'd
I
be
felt
interesting.
like
I haven't seen that. That'd be
I'll
interesting.
show you. I'll
try that out.
So they're great, and it's like to help you get into a better pigeon position, but it like opens up your piriformis and your hip and the back and your glutes. And when I started doing that and unlocked that part of my glute, I noticed that the setup for the snatch, I could like really tuck my shoulders back and actually like hold the bar with my back and use my legs to push right because I could get my hips in a better position. So a lot of it I think is like maybe people can't, because they have these mobility issues, they can't put themselves in a position to really lift
execute the lift.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what me and you were speaking in my office earlier about it is, people come into the gym from all different walks of life. Sometimes you get teenagers who aren't injured, who they pick it up super quickly, or someone who learns when they're younger. Sometimes you get someone who's in their 40s, maybe they used to be an athlete back in the day. Maybe they even had injuries back in the day that they didn't rehab. So like, for all these people, it would be so beneficial to do the personal training to begin with, because the one-on-ones, because hey, now we can highlight you're not moving well here, and then giving them the breakdown and the exercises or mobility or whatever you need to give them. Because in a class, I mean, obviously the class is a lot more hectic. There's a lot more bodies moving around, and you're not going to get that individualized attention because there's just simply not enough time to do that with everyone.
Right. And I think that the private training after injury is the same kind of thing as like doing the exercises with you. Like it's more just accountability that you're moving the right way. Like that was what you said to me. You were like, you got to start doing these exercises at home. Like you actually have to go and grab that little mini band and start doing these clamshells. Dude. It's going to look dumb, but like, you're going to have to do some side planks, and like, that stuff works. But it isn't fun. It's not the fun stuff to do.
It's not the sexy part, but it's the necessary part if you want to stay healthy and keep lifting. So
for sure.
Yeah, that's why it was. Brandon was a great test subject because his injury, the pain level is pretty high, and we got him fixed pretty quickly. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you put it that way, where it was only 10 to 12 sessions over the span of 6 weeks, that doesn't sound that bad. But I remember being in the middle of that, being like, oh God, when is this going to be over?
Dude, when you're in an injury, it feels like that is like the world. It just feels like that is absolutely everything. And you can't, like, dude, I remember the first time I was in your office and we did that contrast therapy
combination
stuff,
therapy back in Haymarket,
One, I didn't think that was like, I mean, maybe it did something. I thought it was okay. But, like, at that point, I was just so tight. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, that combination therapy wasn't that great. I didn't think so.
That's why I don't use it anymore.
Oh really?
Yeah. I like I use.
It was
I like,
okay, but
I like the tools. When I was back at the old clinic,
is
sweet. The dry needling's great. The flossing's great. Digging elbows into people's great. You know, those are my preferred tools. So
Those are my favorite ones too, and they all don't feel good. So, real quick note on injuries here, guys. For those listening, it's inevitable for you to get injured. I think that's a really good thing to talk about, and there's a lot of stigma around CrossFit where it's like, oh, if you do that, you're going to get injured. It doesn't matter what you do. If you do nothing, you're going to get injured, right? If you have repetitive lack of motion, you're just going to be sitting down the whole time. Your hips are going to get tight, shoulders are going to get tight, you're going to wobble around, you're going to lose your balance. So it doesn't matter what you do, right? And it's okay to be injured. That's a part of life. It's part of what happens. But when it happens, you want to have guys like Jim or Monroe, myself, who you can kind of consult and kind of go with and everything like that. So keep that in mind, right? That's just kind of something I think you have to accept in life. Do you guys agree with that? Disagree with that?
I totally agree.
Okay.
And I think as long as you don't make your training methodology a sport, I think you'll be fine. So like, you know, I use this example. People ask me if CrossFit's dangerous. I'm like, hey, you know, if we were to go play pickup basketball or throw the pigskin around, like, probably not going to get hurt. But if I'm going like full on 100% in game mode, like that's a sport. We're playing football now.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna get injured. So if you treat your workouts in a gym like you're going out playing football against people, like, you might get a little banged up, you know. But you can do CrossFit and make it feel good. You can just move and breathe and move through a full range of motion and have your body happy with you.
yeah, I think I'd rather. And there was actually a huge lawsuit from the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Where they basically said that CrossFit causes more injuries than regular training, and it was a very big deal. And CrossFit, the headquarters filed a suit against them, being like, hey, this is defamation, and CrossFit actually won against that. So no, I don't think that it's inherently a more dangerous way of training or sport than anything else. I just think that, you know, people have egos, and that can lead to overuse of weight with poor technique, and then they fall into these bad categories. But I mean I treat football players, I treat any sport you play, you're gonna get injured. But I'd much rather get injured than to sit on my couch all day and get hypertensive and get diabetes and all the other bad maladies that come with being sedentary. So I think the real take-home thing is just like, hey, if you're injured or you feel like you're in the process of getting injured, get evaluated, nip it in the bud early, and you'll be grateful you did, because some rehabs take a lot longer than others, and you always want to get it taken care of quick so that you can get back in the gym and be as efficient, effective, and have as much fun as possible.
Common things that you would suggest for people who are, I'm going to say most people, all right, so quad dominant, somebody that sits in a chair for long periods of time during the day, which with our, kind of remote, we're kind of going towards the remote section, is a lot of people. And even, I guess, if they're not remote, they're probably sitting in a chair. I don't know, Jim, 2 or 3 things you could do during the day just to make sure that you can, loosen the quads up, take care of the knee.
Yeah, so I think for most people, especially people who listen to this podcast who, lift or do CrossFit, rolling the quads. I think we've nailed that a bit. That's a self-mobilization technique that's super efficient. Stretching the quads is also super important, because when you're sitting, that's when those get really tight. And then for the upper body, rolling the lats and rolling the pecs, both of those muscles internally rotate the shoulders, and that's going to give you really limited overhead mobility. So rolling and stretching quads, rolling and stretching pecs, rolling and stretching lats, those are where I would say 99% of the people should be doing that, fairly regularly. So that would be the easiest place to start.
Yeah,
and I'll put some links in there if you guys don't know what some of that stuff is, so you guys can go to YouTube, Rumble, anything like that, and just take a look at what that looks like. Monroe.
Yeah, we made a couple videos we have top 5 mobilizations for the hip and
top
sweet. 5 mobilizations
we'll link
for
those.
the shoulder. So
perfect.
If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put it in the cards above, and we'll link it in the description.
Cool. All right, guys, where else do we want to go? Knees.
I think we pretty much covered the knee stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Let's do closing thoughts, and we'll be good to go. Who wants to go first?
You can go on.
Monroe's
looking at me like he wants to.
Monroe, you're in, man. Closing thoughts, bro.
Oh, man. Closing thoughts. Don't be closed-minded. Don't, get into a position where you think you know everything. I've been doing CrossFit for 10 years now, and I just reorganized the way I think about human movement, like within the last 6 months, just through, you know, being open-minded, looking at other coaches, looking at other people talking, you know, going through different things. So I think as soon as you think you know everything and you think you know the squat, you think you know the snatch, you don't need anybody's help, that's when you're, you know, you don't know anything really. So stay open-minded.
Yeah, I like that. I think, you know, being humble enough to ask for help, whether it's, you know, from the coaches, if you feel like something's not moving well, or pulling me aside and, you know, asking me if, you know, you need help with something. You know, everyone here, and that's something I've been saying to Monroe since I met him, it's created a hell of a community here, and everyone's super supportive, and that's something that I really love and respect about this gym. So yeah, don't be shy. Ask coach, ask me. Everyone's here to help everyone get better. So if you're having problems, don't let it fall by the wayside.
I was gonna say ask for help. Put your ego put your ego aside, right?
Yeah, I struggle with that.
I struggle with that in pretty much all facets of life, right? Work, the gym, injured. You know, you don't know everything. I love to think I know everything. I definitely don't. And I was really thankful when I, you know, finally, you know, tucked my tail in between my legs, and I was just like, hey Jim, my knees hurt, man. Can you help out? And world of difference that it's made. So big thanks to that. Ask for help. Check the ego at the door. Go from there.
Awesome.
All right, you guys. If you're enjoying the podcast, if you guys go on Apple Podcast, the Verity Podcast, give us that 5-star review. That would be great. Monroe, where can we find you on YouTube, dude?
At Monroe Miller, and yeah.
Lots of great stuff coming out from Monroe. If you guys don't follow that channel, highly recommend that. Dr. Jim, dude, good as always. Thanks for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure, gentlemen.
All right, guys. Cool. You're listening to the Verity Podcast. We'll see you next time.